over the last few days, we've detailed the procedures of going through Kiddushin via Kesef money and Shtar document. At the end of the day yesterday, we began addressing Kiddushin via Bia relations. And so we'll pick up, actually, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down. Ibailahu. So Ibailahu, they asked the question, Tchilas Biakona, Osof Biakona, which moment, it's not an instantaneous thing. When you give something to somebody, then that happens at a specific moment. There isn't really a time connection to it. So when you do Bia and when you do Shtar and Munt and Kesef, there isn't a question of sort of when during the process it's considered to have been completed. But Bia is a relationship thing, and that happens over a period of time. And so as a result, is it the initiation of it, or is it the completion of the connection that actually resolves and completes the Kiddushin? So nafkamina kikon sheher rabau pashta yadav kabla Kiddushin miacher. So one can imagine, if it's not quite appropriate, but if in the middle of the relationship the woman gives reaches out her hand and accepts Kiddushin from via either Kesef or Shtar from somebody else, one can imagine that would cause a question, because obviously once Kiddushin has happened with one person, you can't have Kiddushin with somebody else unless there's first a get. So the Kiddushin with the second person wouldn't make a difference and wouldn't be valid. So that would be a question that would be determined by whether we say the beginning or the end of the relations is the moment of Kiddushin, or alternatively, Inami l'Kohen Gadol, or as Rashi explains, Inami l'Kohen Gadol, it's the second of the narrow lines. So im mutter l'kadosh bia, that the answer to whether we follow the beginning or the end will determine whether or not a Kohen Gadol is allowed to engage in relations as a method of creating Kiddushin. Because amrat, as we continue in Rashi in the 1, 2, 3, 4th line of the Rashi, amrat tchilat biyakona, if you say the beginning of the relations is when the Kiddushin happens, well then mutter, everything would be permitted, because the moment that he begins, and again, a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to have relations with somebody who is already no longer a virgin, and so, but here the relations are totally fine. He's marrying somebody who's a virgin. But the im sof biyakona. But if we say that it's only the end of the relations that cause the woman to be his mikudesha to him, so nimtzas beulam mishas ha'ara. So, but she becomes a one who has had relations and no longer a virgin as the moment that they begin the initiation of the contact. So shalol l'shem Kiddushin, and that initiation does not perform Kiddushin if we say that the end of the bia is when what matters, and then va'asirule, and she will be immediately prohibited to him. Diksiv, as we say in Vayikra Kavala Pasuk Yudalid, Besula mi amav yikach, that he needs to take a woman who's a virgin, and so as a result, that would be a second potential nafkamina for why it would matter if we say Kiddushin initiation happens at the beginning or at the end. So what's the halacha? So Amar Amemar Mishmei the Rava Kol Haboel Daito Al Gemar Biyan, that everybody who every man who engages in relations is focused on the completion of that relationship, and so as a result, that will be what we'll focus on. Here Tosos asks a very interesting question and offers 4 different answers. So we've now concluded that it seems like we focus on the end, but the problem is, if we take a look at Rashi Tosos 3 lines down in the wide lines of Tosos, Kol Haboel Daito Al Gamar Bia, Tema, it's a wonder. The Perik Habal Yavamto, that in the Perik of in that Perik in Yavamos, Dafnun Hey Amabed, Yalfinan De Isha Niknis Labala Bahara. We learned that a woman becomes connected to her husband at the moment of the initiation of the contact. So asya kicha kicha de arayos v'ha'ara hainu tchilas bia, that when it comes to both violating the prohibition of the various relationships that one is not allowed to have, and the situation and becoming married. So we see that both of them are focused on the initial moment. And yet here we have said that the end of the relations is what matters. So the question is, how do we juxtapose these two things together? So for Omer Rashba, so Rashba offers the first answer that Tosfos says, the key amrinan ha'ara kona, that when we say that the initiation of the matter causes the situation to be completed, and when we say that in Yevamos, hainu b'shelo asa, that's when ki'im ha'ara, that's when you only did the initial relations and did not actually complete the relationship. And so as a result, there was no climax, so to speak. And so as a result, that's their only moment that there was this. Uperish miyad, and they separated immediately. Well, that would indicate to the woman that his intention was not to marry her through the Gemar Bia, but he had already said that it was this relationship that was going to do it. And so as a result, it's clear that his intention was on the initiation. Aval hacha, ma'irish Gemar Bia. So, but here we're talking about where the connection was completed. There was a climax. The Aslo Kani Bahara, that so then it would not cause her to be acquired, to be Mikudeshes right at the moment of the initiation. The Kamar Kola Boel, Velo Kamar Kol Hama'ara. So as a result, the fact that the Gemara that you specifically uses the language of Boel, that the one who is having relations, and the implication is the complete relations, and here it doesn't say reference to Hama'ara, the one who just has the beginning of the relations. And so as a result, that's the Rashba's answer. There are three more answers to offer, though. The Rivam offers answer number 2. Answer number 2 is Rivam Tirates Ha-de-niknes Beha'ara, Hainu b'mefaresh. That's where he sharotza liknos Beha'ara. That's where he specifically told her at the beginning about Bistam Daito al Gemar Bia. So again, a slight modification of what the Rashba offered, saying not that it was what he actually did, but he actually told her ahead of time that was his intention. So therefore, that's why it would work. And Rabbeinu Tam Tirich, Rabbeinu Tam says the following: to acharesh nisrabta ha'ara kigmar bia im kain kol mokum shemazgir bia beha'ara ka'amar. So he offers the following: we have to understand this Gemara based on the Gemara in Yevamos. That the Gemara in Yevamos makes it clear that what matters is the beginning of the relationship. V'hachi kamar, and so this is what we're saying here. Tchilas ha'arakona o besof ha'arakona. So we know that it's the initiation of the relationship, but is it sort of like at what point of to be graphic, at what point of penetration you could say is it that matters? Is it the beginning or is it further into the penetration? So the Lamanda Amar Ha'arazu Hachnasas Atara, right? Is it the Shayach Ba Tchila V'Sof, that when one focuses on whether or not the crown of a man's member is inserted, so then the question then we can answer the question of, is that the beginning or the end? And so as a result, before that happens, it would be the beginning. After that happens, it's the end. And according to the Rabbeinu Tam's understanding of our Gemara, the answer is that what matters is the slightly further penetration. That's the moment of sof ha'ara, and therefore that would be the moment of marriage. The Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon, and so fourth and final answer is offered by Nisim Gaon, and he tirates. He answers Vamos Iri Acher Kiddushin. No, we're not understanding the whole Gemara correctly over there in Yevamos. That really in Yevamos we're talking about where Kiddushin has already happened. And therefore what we're focused on is the moment of marriage when it comes to marrying somebody, that an element of chuppah could be relations to ayidei osa ha'ara havi kinesua. That at that moment when they begin the initial relationship, the initial sexual relationship, so then that's when they will become fully married. Kamo chuppah, and it'll be like a chuppah. Dila acher Kiddushin, that comes after Kiddushin. Bekasha l'perusho. However, Tosfos notes now that with respect to Rav Nisan Gaon's suggestion, it's difficult because to kicha gabi Kiddushin ksiv, because the Gemara over there makes the connection by kicha, and that is a Kiddushin based connection, not a chuppah based connection, and so not an asuan based connection. So that makes it different. The lo myri b'chuppah klal, and that Gemara doesn't seem to be talking about chuppah at all. So we've now got the 4 different answers, and it seems, again, that from a practical standpoint, thankfully, we don't. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have a Kohen Gadol, but thankfully, we don't usually have a situation of somebody being offered Kiddushin in the middle of their having relations. So it's not really particularly practical, but it's an interesting issue nonetheless. And it's interesting that we have, highlighting the difficulty of the question is the fact that we've got 4 different answers that are offered by Tosfos. Okay. So that concludes our first question, and we focus on the bottom line is that we focus on the end of the relations in connection with Kiddushin according to our Gemara here. So now the Gemara asks the following question: Can that same bia effectuate both Kiddushin and Nisuin, or is it just Kiddushin? So here we go. So they ask the question: Bia nisuinosa o irusinosa? When does it actually also do nisuin? Does again reminder that the 2 stages of marriage are Erusin is the first stage, which is referred to as Kiddushin. That's the process of doing Erusin. And then Nisuin is the second stage that is accomplished through Chuppah. And so the question is when you do the relations, does it actually end up doing both steps, or is it just doing the first step? And nafkamina liyorsha, there's lots of potential nafkamina. So what's the differences? Why does it make a difference? So the first is that when it comes to inheritance, meaning that if they've done both Kiddushin and Nisuin, well then it would make then that would mean that the husband would be able to inherit the wife litamela in order to become tameh for her. So then if he's a Kohen, he can only become tameh if he's the full wife, and not if she is just his erusa, not if they are have just completed the first stage. And to annul her vows, as we've seen that the husband has the right to annul vows, but that only kicks in fully after Nisuin and not after Erusin. Amrit Nisuin Osa, and if you say that if it was Nisuin, so then Yarsha, he does inherit her, Umitamela, and he can become Tame, Umefer Nidara, and he can annul her vows. The Amrit Erusin Osa, and if you say that it only does Erusin, Eno Yarsha, the Eno Mitame, the Love, the Eno Mefer Nidara, and he won't be able to do any of those things. So what's the halacha? So Amar Abaye, now we're going to offer 3 different efforts to try and answer this question. And so the first 2 are going to be quickly rejected, and the third will be discussed in further. So let's take a look. So Tashma. So Amar Abaye, Tashma, Av Zakai Bevito, B'Kedusha, B'Kesef B'Shtar Ubavia, that the father has the right to be in control of all these different kinds of Kiddushin, and one of them that he's mentioned here is, of course, the relations. The Zakai B'Metziasa, and he gets her whatever she finds, Umasi Yada, and he's entitled to the work that she does, Ubahara Nidareha, and to annul her vows, Umakabal Gita, and he can also accept the divorce on her behalf. And Rashi here is Im Girsha Bala Min Ha'erusin Ba'oda Nara. If we're talking about where the husband divorces her while she is still a nara or younger, and he can accept the get on her behalf because he is her father. But she, the father's not entitled to eat produce from her field during her lifetime if in fact she gets a field from some other source. Nises, if once the girl becomes married, and so here again we seem to be distinguishing between kiddusheha b'via, that was the beginning of of this Mishnah, and this Mishnah is in Ketubot Daf Mem Vav Amud Bet. But now once she gets married, Yasser Alav Habal Sha'ochel Peros B'chaya, that the husband has additional rights because he gets to consume the property, the produce of her field, even while she's alive. So Katani Bia, but Katani Nise. So the point is that there here, if in fact Kedusha B'via also causes Nasiya, also causes them to be married, well, then why is there a distinction between Nises? Why did we specifically mention Nises? If we should have put the Bia category of Kiddushin, we shouldn't have even mentioned that. So Katani Bia is, again, the Gemara itself helps clarify the question or the effort at a proof. Katani Bia, Katani Nises. We've taught about Bia relations as a method of Kiddushin, and we've taught about Nises getting married as a separate step. So doesn't that show that there are actually two different steps? No, doesn't, not necessarily, because Kikatani Nises Asha'ara, when it refers to getting married, it could refer to the other methods of Kiddushin, namely kesef and shtar. And so as a result, it's not a good proof. So now we're going to bring our second effort at a proof, and this time from Rava, and he's going to bring another Mishnah. This Mishnah is on Nida Daf Mem Daled Amabet, and this Mishnah is going to have the benefit of referencing only Bia as a method of Kiddushin, and so as a result, that will seem to be an even stronger proof than the one that Abaye offered. So Amar Rava Tashma Bas Shalosh Shanim B'Yom Echad Miskadeshes B'Via. A girl who's 3 years and 1 day has the possibility of being married through relations. V'im Ba'aleha Yavam Kna'a. And if God forbid her husband were to have died childless and she's still at that young age, so then at that moment when they have relations, so that's how the woman could be married to the Yavam, to her initial husband's surviving brother. The Chayavin Aleha Mishum Eishes Ish, and having had such relations, she's considered married and will cause somebody who has relations with her to have violated the prohibition of adultery. Umitame esbaola, and if in fact she were, maybe not at the age of 3, but at some point she begins to have her menstrual cycle and she becomes a nida. So then, if somebody has relations with her during that person will become tamei. As we turn to Yud Amabet, L'tamei Mishkav Tachton Ke'elyon, and it also has the situation where the person who has relations with her will be considered the kind of tuma that actually has the ability to create tuma in others. Not just almost like an avhatuma, but im nises lekohen ocheles betruma. And if she were to be married, and then again here the im nises, we're referencing actual marriage, so that suggests that we're going to have again a different kind of a different stage of a relationship, because we were talking initially about Kiddushin by Bia, and now we say V'im Nisis, if she actually got married, L'chohen, to a Kohen, Ocheles B'truma, so then she'd be able to eat Truma. V'im Ba Leha Echa Mikol Araya Shebetorah, and if one of the people with whom she's not allowed to have relations comes and has relations with her, Mumasin Al Yada, they will be put to death as a result of that relations. V'hi Petura, but she's going to be exempt, because she's young, and so she's so that's why she will not be covered. And if she is the daughter of a Kohen, and any people who would disqualify her as have relations with that, well, then Solomon Akun, and then she becomes disqualified from being able to be part of the kahuna, in the sense that she won't be able to eat truma. So again, the main point that we're trying to come up with here is katani bia v'katani nisis. Again, we had two different points that were made in the Mishnah. One was, we talked about bia as a method of Kiddushin, and then later on we said that nisait, that she's married. So doesn't that show that there needs to be something else that happens between the bia and her being married? No, it does not necessarily mean to be that, because Hachikamar, we can say that this is what the Gemara is saying, or what that Mishnah is saying, excuse me. Ihani nisuin de kohen ninhu ocheles betruna. That if that nisuin, meaning that it's referring back to the Kiddushin with bia, that Kiddushin with bia fulfills the obligation to do nisuin as well, and so as a result, she's considered as if she were married. And if that were to have been done with a kohen, so then she would be able to eat truma. So our second effort has also failed. Again, both of these efforts, we're trying to say that it does not accomplish both. Well, now we're going to go in the other direction and say that maybe it does accomplish both, and we're going to cite a midrash in the Sifri for that purpose. Okay, so Tashma, come and let's take a look at the next proof. Uchvar shalach Yochanan ben Bagbag Eitzel Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir L'Netzivan. So Yochanan ben Bagbag sent a message to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and in Netzivan, and he said the following: Shamati alecha sha'ata omer arusa bas Yisrael ochels betruma. Now, as a preliminary note, I will note that we're going to give this two different explanations, this midrash that we're quoting. But so I'm going to interpret it as we're going to interpret it with the first explanation now, and then we'll interpret it the second way when we get to Ravina's comment. But okay, so let's take a look. And so first, Shema, I heard that you've said that if a daughter of a Yisrael who is an arusa just has done only Kiddushin with a kohen, that she's allowed to eat truma right away. Now we know that in fact that the Ula says that she's not going to be allowed to eat truma right away because because we're worried that maybe she'll give to her brothers or sisters from that truma, and so she won't be able to. And so we're worried that truma will be eaten by a non-Kohen. But in any event, the point is that from a biblical perspective, she would be allowed to do so. So shalach lo. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira sent back to him, yes, that's exactly right. V'ata i'ata omer, Cain, you don't say that? Don't you know? Mochsekas b'kasha ata baki b'chadrei Torah. B'chadrei Torah, I understood that you were a very knowledgeable person, Rabbi Yochanan ben Bagbag. So how could you? I'm surprised that you don't even know this. Lidrosh b'kal v'chomer yata yodei. You don't know how to learn a kal v'chomer, because look at this kal v'chomer that I have that shows that it must be that a woman who, once she's done erusin with a Kiddushin, should be allowed to. I'm sorry, erusin with a kohen should be allowed to have a truma, because umashivcha kananis, when it comes to a non-Jewish slave, she'ein biasa ma'achila sabitruma, her marital relations, if she has marital relations with her Kohen owner, that doesn't do anything for her. It doesn't cause her to be able to eat truma. But kaspa ma'achila sabitruma, but if she's actually purchased by the Kohen, well, then she's able to eat truma. So zu, when it comes to the wife of a Kohen, should be a sama achila sabitruma, where if they were to have marital relations, she would be able to eat truma, and presumably we're talking about. It's not clear what we're talking about, but we'll see in a moment. Eino din shekaspa machila sabitruma. So then certainly her, when she does kesef, she should be able to eat truma as well. So aval maaseh. But at the same time, I don't know what I can do, because Shahari Amru Chachamim, because the rabbis have said Ein arusa bas Yisrael ochels betruma ad shetikanas l'chuppah. That in the end of the day, we're not going to, again, and it's based on a rabbinic decree, that we're not going to allow an arusa, a woman who's just gone through Kiddushin, to have truma until she actually goes through chuppah as well. And so heichi dami. So what case are we talking about here? Namely, we have two cases. We have a case of kesef and a case of bia. And so what cases of that is Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira referring to in his Kal V'chomer? So if you're talking about where the bia was in connection with chuppah, v'chesef al yedei chuppah, and v'chesef shal yedei chuppah, and also the money was accompanied with chuppah, well then b'tervayu mechal achla. Both of them the woman should be allowed to eat. What are you talking about by saying that there was a rabbinic decree that would prevent her from eating? If both Kiddushin, whether by kesef or by bia, have happened, and Nisuin has happened, and there's been chuppah, so then she is the Kohen's full wife. So this cannot possibly be the explanation of what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is saying. So 1 second, you want to try and tell me that when we refer to bia, we're talking about a bia that is accompanied by chuppah, but kesef, which is not accompanied by chuppah, well then hachatarti. Now you have two different concepts that you're talking about. One that involves chuppah and one that doesn't involve chuppah. That's going to be your kal v'chomer, but here we're talking about money where it seems like only one action has happened, especially when we're talking about the case of the slave. There's only one action that's happened, so it doesn't make any sense to have two versus one. So it must be that we're talking about where bia didn't happen with chuppah, the kesef shelo al yedei chuppah, and the kesef didn't happen with connection with chuppah. So the point is that we can't be talking. We want to make sure that this kal v'chomer it has two comparable things, so they should be comparable completely. And so must be that both the money and the bia don't have chuppah connected to it. And so as a result. That must be, and so now the Gemara finishes the proof. If you say it all works, if you say that bia also does nisuin, because now when you have the bia, it doesn't just do the Kiddushin, it does the nisuin also. And mishum hachi pshita le de alima la bia mikesef, and so that's why it highlights that bia is stronger than kesef. And so as a result, ela amra Kiddushin osef. But if you say it only does Kiddushin, ma'ishna hacha de pshita le, oh ma'ishna hacha de misapkale. Why should we be uncertain about money, but certain about the relations? How should that relations will allow the woman to eat truma? Why would you even say that? It's only done the same exact step. So it makes only sense if we were to say this midrash only seems to make sense if we understand it as referring to both kesef and bia without any chuppah. And so, and the point is that because the bia has the power to enable her to become fully married and therefore also to be able to eat truma, and yet that does nothing with respect to the slave. So as a result, kesef, which actually does something for the slave, so then it should certainly be able to do something in connection with the wife eating truma. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So now we have response number one. This is question number one that's going to undermine and thereby cause us to reject Rav Nachman this effort at a proof, and then we'll see that there's actually a second method of rejecting the proof that Ravina will offer, and then so in the end we'll have proved nothing with respect to this question. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak la'olam emelach b'via sha'al yedei chuppah. Really, I'm going to tell you that we're all talking about that when it comes to relations, we're talking about with chuppah, but kesef shelo al yedei chuppah. And when we talk about kesef, we're talking about without chuppah. And when it comes to your question, you objected hacha tarti v'hacha fadka, that one was with two things and one was with one thing. No, kal v'chomer miya say there was nonetheless a kal v'chomer, because the whole point is v'haki shalachai, and this was the point that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira was telling to Rabbi Yochanan ben Bagbag. When it comes to a shifka kananis, it doesn't make a difference whether if she had relations, she's not going to be able to eat truma, even if there was some chuppah, because the chuppah doesn't make any difference when it comes to the acquisition of a slave. So kafka, but yet kaspa machilasa below chuppah, but yet money without a chuppah will allow her to eat. So zub should be asa machilasa betruma ayidei chuppah. But when it comes to a woman who gets married to her husband, the Kohen, and can eat truma as a result of both having bia and chuppah, so then eno din shekaspa machilasa betruma below chuppah. So she should certainly be able to eat truma as a result of doing Kiddushin with money, even though there's no chuppah. But again, but Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, but what am I going to do? Shaharei amru chachamim ena rusa bas Yisrael ocheles betruma ad shetikanis lechuppah mishum ula, because there's the rabbinic decree that Ula made, that Ula told us about, Ula's concern, namely that we're worried about whether or not she will feed the food to the brothers or sisters, and so as a result, that's why we're going to have that. Ben Bagbag. So in second, why did Ben Bagbag not agree to this Kal V'chomer? So Gabi Shivcha Kananis Lo Shire B'Kinyana. There's no when you acquire a slave, there's nothing left to acquire, meaning the kesef fully completes the acquisition. But here, when it comes to the marriage, shir b'kinyana, there's something left over after a kesef kedushin. Namely, there has to be a nisuin, and so as a result, that's why he didn't agree to that kal. So that was response number one. Ravina tells us, you know what? I have a different explanation that will undermine the proof of this brisa. Really, everybody agrees. Even Rabbi Yochanan ben Bagbag would agree that, according to the Torah, she should be able to eat. And actually, the debate that Yehuda ben Beseira and Rabbi Yochanan ben Bagbag was not about the question of whether biblically she's allowed to eat if you do Kiddushin by Kesef, but rather it's about whether there's any rabbinic institution that is going to cause her to be prohibited to eat until Nisuin. And this is the conversation that they had. Shamati alecha sha'ata omer arusa bas Yisrael ochelas betruma. So Rabbi Ben Bagbag says to Rabbi Yehuda, that Ben Beseira, that look, I heard that you say that a daughter of who does Kiddushin with a Kohen is allowed to eat truma right away. And you are not worried about simpon. Namely, you're worried about Ula's concern about maybe there's going to be some that maybe she'll feed it to a sibling, but you're not concerned about the simpon, which Rashi understands as that's something that will undermine and cause the entire transaction marriage to be annulled. So Shalach Lei, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira sent back to Ben Bagbag, Ba'ata i'ata yomer king, you don't agree with that? Muchazakani Torah. I understood that you were very knowledgeable in Torah. Lidrosh b'kal v'chomer i'ata yodea, and that you don't know, and yet you don't know how to do do a kal v'chomer umashif l'kananis, because look at this kal v'chomer. You have this kananis maidservant, a non-Jewish slave, she'ein b'yasab ma'achila sab b'truma, that her having relations with a kohen does not allow her to eat truma, kaspa ma'achila sab b'truma, and yet if the kohen buys her, she's able to eat truma. V'lo chayshin on l'simpon, and yet we do not worry about some kind of annulment of that transaction. So zu should be a samachila sabitruma, that this, when it comes to the wife, and we're going to allow her to eat truma, eno din shekaspa machila sabitruma. So she should certainly be able to eat truma below nechashel simpon, and we shouldn't worry about simpon. But I still can't let this woman eat truma completely, because shaharei amru chachamim, because we have Ula's concern that the sages say arusa bas Yisrael eino ochels betruma, the daughter of Yisrael is not able to eat truma. Ad she, and as we turn to Yud Aleph and Aleph, ad shetikanis lechuppah mishum deula, until she actually gets fully married and does nisuin, because through chuppah, because of Ula's concern about her giving some food to her sibling, Uven Bagbag. So why didn't Ben Bagbag like this kal v'chomer? Simbon ba'avadim leislay. You don't have that same concern about some kind of annulment of a monetary transaction, which is what the purchase of a slave is, unlike with respect to a situation with marriage, where you could have an annulment. So now, what is that annulment? So that we're talking, and we're going to, with respect to, because what is the annulment? Just as a background, as explained by Rashi, the annulment with respect to the woman is that the man might find some kind of blemish in her that would indicate that the whole transaction was an invalid transaction, and so as a result, we treat it as if there was never a marriage in the first place. But but when it comes to a slave, who, if we're talking about some defect that is part of the body that's usually exposed, he's going to be able to see it, and as a result, he's clearly accepted the slave anyway. And if you're going to tell me it's some kind of hidden thing, so my nafka blei, what difference does it make? It doesn't impact how the slave works for this person. So l'malacha kabayle, because the slave is acquired to do the work, and lo ichbale. So who cares what kind of physical blemish there might be underneath the clothing? So nimsa ganav o kuvyustus. And if you say that maybe the slave will be a thief, Rashi understands kuvyustus as a kidnapper, but Tosfos understands it as according to Rabbeinu Hananel, that it's a gambler. And that, well, then higio, that is a kind of situation that is common, and everybody who purchases a slave knows that they're going to have to accept the situation. So my amrit. So what are you going to tell me then? So listim mizuyan o nichtav l'malchus, or maybe the slave was an armed robber, or was written about as by the kingship that they are going to be killed, meaning that they were sentenced to death. Hanukala Islahu, those have a voice, and so as a result, as Rashi explains, the point is that the person will know about them, and so as a result, by choosing to go through with the transaction, there's no ability to annul. So Ben Bagba is like, you don't have the possibility of annulment, so you can't, when it comes to a slave, so you can't learn from a slave to a wife, and so as a result, Ben Bagba doesn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's kal v'chomer. So Michti Ben Lamar lo achla, but at the end of the day, whether you follow Ben Bagbag, who's concerned about simpon, or you follow Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, who's concerned about Ula's concern about feeding the siblings, the woman's not allowed to eat. So my benayu, why are they having this argument about what the reason is for the rabbinic decree? What's the difference between these two approaches? So Ika Benayu, there's actually is a difference. And what is that difference? My apologies for not scrolling the screen. The difference is Kibel, Masar, Vahalak, that there are three different categories. One, oh, shoot. Okay, so my apologies that I've now disconnected from one source, but at least I've got my other source still working. And so the difference is that the Kibel, that if in fact the Kohen accepted to marry the woman, irrespective of whether she had some kind of physical abnormality, so as a result, there wouldn't be any possibility of simpon, but there would still be a possibility of her feeding her siblings. And so therefore, according to Ben Bagbag, there wouldn't be a concern, but according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseru, who has Ula's concern, there would be a concern. And so therefore, she would not be able to eat truma according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, but Ben Bagbag would allow her because there's no possibility of annulment. On the other hand, if you had the case of Masar v'halach, either where the father delivered the daughter to the agents of the husband, or where the father's agents continued to walk with the husband's agents after delivering the girl to them, as these are both, as Rashi explains the situations. Well, in both of those cases, well, we no longer have a concern about her feeding her siblings because there are lots of people with her, and in any event, their siblings are no longer around. But we do still have the concern of simpon because the any kind of physical abnormality has not been accepted by the husband. So with that, we are now ready to go back to our Mishnah and discuss this debate between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel with respect to the value of kesef that we saw at the very beginning. Beit Shammai said that you need a dinar. Beit Hillel said you need only a pruta, and we're going to analyze that. But for that, you will need to stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. So I wish everybody a fabulous day. And Robert, since you are probably back to being the host, I'd ask that when you to end the meeting, please make sure to end it for everyone so that the recording stops.
Thank you all. Thank you.
See you tomorrow. Hopefully it should be more on time, God willing, tomorrow. Be well.